There's going to be a meeting with or without you. So the discomfort of a conversation around a will today far outweighs the inheritance of confusion that you could leave to somebody that ultimately results in brothers and sisters no longer speaking to each other.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Darryl Lyons.
Hey, this is Darryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of PAX Financial Group, and you're listening to Retire in Texas. This information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. So I was recently updating my wills. You know, I hadn't updated them in a while, and you know, we had a couple kids at the time when I first wrote our will, and I didn't write it personally, but went to an attorney and wrote it, and then subsequently, you know, life just got busy like most of us, and we looked up and we had 4 kids and we had amassed some wealth, and the tax code had changed, and some of the people that were in our wills that needed to do things had gotten older, and just a lot has changed. I mean, my son is 19 now, so there was just a lot in there. So my wife and I, we decided to get our wills updated, and I thought, you know, I might as well kind of share my thoughts on this idea of having a will. And I want to do it with you guys by sharing 4 stories, because I've had conversations and a lot of presentations about wills over the years. And it's just one of those things, like, I know I need to go to the dentist. I appreciate you preaching to me, but I don't want to hear it. And that's how it felt. So I just thought I'd maybe frame this will conversation up through the life of 4 people, and to make it interesting at the very least. And the way I think about a will and all the legal documents that come with that is that there is going to be a meeting about your money. There's going to be a meeting with or without you. So the discomfort of a conversation around a will today far outweighs the inheritance of confusion that you could leave to somebody that ultimately results in brothers and sisters no longer speaking to each other. And I've seen this too often over the last 20 years. So let's look at some of these examples. And I'll start with Prince, or the artist formerly known as Prince, the iconic singer and songwriter, musician. He passed away in 2016 at age 57, and due to an accidental overdose. He had amassed about $156 million net worth and never had a will, nor did he set up an estate plan. So, as you would imagine, it was not easy to figure out where all the money goes. And you think about a judge that's appointed to facilitate this process. This is known as the probate process. I mean, he has no direction, so he's going to have to use his judgment and rely on precedent and try to understand who's entitled to what. And there's certainly a formal process that, you know, Prince wasn't the first time that somebody's died without a will, but every family and situation is unique. I mean, Prince didn't have a spouse. He didn't have children. He had 6 half siblings, and all of them are raising their hand saying, I get something. And so this probate court process, as you would imagine, took a while, not a couple months, not a couple years. It took 6 years. And, you know, one of the valuable things that you have that's, you know, has to be considered now is this intellectual property and these music catalogs. I mean, there's a lot of value to that. In fact, a lot of people are buying these as investments from artists. And so this 156 million, I don't know how it finally settled out, but I do know that it was chaotic. And there's something that's important, relevant to this, that's relative to this, and that's the estate tax. So I don't remember what the 2016 estate tax is. You could look that up. But in 2017, there was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed. That act expires in 2025. And so those people that have estates that are around 14 million, anything above that, this is for individuals, not married. Married, you double it. Anything above that is subject to 40%, about a 40% estate tax. It's a federal estate tax. That doesn't include state inheritance taxes, which Texas doesn't have one, but other states do. So as you can imagine, Prince having 156 million, whatever that threshold was at that time, I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars being taxed. And so with the expiration of the TCJA in 2025, I think it's important for all of us to take a look at our estates, specifically if you're close to that 14 million. And that, by the way, that includes your house, and that includes life insurance policies. I know we say life insurance is not taxable. It's not generally not subject to the income tax, but it is used in the federal estate tax calculation. Because Prince hadn't done any planning of the 156 million, it was actually 50%. 50% of his estate went to state and federal taxes. Can you imagine? I mean, anyways, it's a lot to digest to think that somebody who had worked so hard and taken so much risk and was talented, that half of his wealth went to the federal government. Let's go to the next example. And this one's for you, my attorney friends. I have a lot of attorney friends. I see you, and I tell you, attorney friends, that you need to get your wills done. You know it. You just keep putting it off. And so I'm nudging you here. And probably one of the most famous attorneys of all time did not have a will. That was Abraham Lincoln. He died without a will. And he, like I said, he was an attorney. He was assassinated in 1865. He died what's called intestate, which is without a will, unexpectedly. And so then you have to go to the probate court. Now, I've never been involved in the probate process. That's what attorneys do. But from what I understand, Texas probate process is pretty friendly. But I would imagine if you've got assets that are, a lot of assets and then assets in other states, it can be pretty difficult. And especially if you know a little bit about history, Mary Todd, she suffered from a lot of depression. And with these financial and legal issues that were part of the probate process, I can't imagine that didn't do damage to her. What happens ultimately if there's no will, then the court has to appoint administrators, and this administrator was David Davis, who handled all the legal proceedings. And so, like I said before, a will is not just a document, it's actually a conversation. And so I think, and this is a great example, is, taking the time out and having a conversation about your money now may be uncomfortable, but that discomfort far outweighs the inheritance of confusion that you'll leave behind, where people just don't speak to each other anymore. And, you do a lot as a person to leave a legacy of values, and that can all kind of be destroyed if this isn't constructed in the inheritance or the will or whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money too, isn't constructed thoughtfully. Lincoln's estate was actually, it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it was about $85,000, which in today's dollars is $1.5 million. And it took years to settle. Could have been easier. So the next one I'd like to talk about, number 3, we got 4 of them. So the next one is Pablo Picasso. Now, this guy, I didn't realize how wealthy he was, but he was worth hundreds of millions. The Spanish artist, yes, he did not have a will, and he died in 1973. No clear heirs. Picasso had multiple lovers, children, grandchildren, but he never, ever wrote a will. And so his estate took about 6 years to resolve, and about $30 million in legal fees, which is about $150 million today. The people that won here were as you would imagine, the lawyers, the accountants, and the French federal government, which took a big chunk to cover death taxes. So a lot of times we hear about death taxes, inheritance taxes, and estate taxes, and they're used synonymously. If you get nuance, there is differences, but we'll just call them all death taxes here. But the French government charged a death tax, which was a ton of money. In fact, they had to pay it off. The estate had to pay it off with some art because they didn't have liquidity. And I mean, you can imagine there was conflict, intense disputes over money, property, and his legacy. I think about this, and, some of us can certainly do wills online. And there's, I think, Mama Bear legal forms, there's LegalZoom, there's a lot of solutions. And I don't totally discount those solutions, and they may be fine for a lot of people. And if your estate isn't overly complex, that could be a great option. But I was talking to an attorney the other day, and they said that they get a lot of business from people who set up their wills online and didn't do things the right way. And so there can be just some little things that may be problematic, like not having independent witnesses or notaries. And so just want you to know that you can certainly do it online, but if you have multiple kids, or if you have different marriages and any significant money, then I do think taking some time out, and it's going to cost a little bit more money, but having an attorney write it up, and that person can kind of be a thinking partner in that, like lean on their experience. I think that's really helpful. And so yes, it's a little money, but I get a little nervous by mistakes that could happen on the online forms. Not terribly opposed to it, but just be considerate there. At the end of the day, Picasso, kind of going back to Picasso here, they did pay off the federal government, the French government, with several of his masterpieces. And so the problem is then the masterpieces, I don't know, they're scattered all across the world. They did create a museum in Paris with some of the masterpieces. So I guess that was a good thing. Okay, last one. A lot of you may or may not know this person, Bono, Sonny Bono. And I think, obviously, if you think like me, it's Bono and Cher, right? Famous singer, actor, politician. Didn't have a will. And he died suddenly in a skiing accident, for those that remember. And he was 62 years old, never had a will, no clear legal plan. His wife, Mary, was forced to go through the lengthy and expensive probate process to decide how the assets were going to be distributed. And then, of course, he has somebody come up and says, hey, I'm an illegitimate son and I want some money. And then, of course, Cher sues because she has royalty from music. So then the legal battles and the cost, the court time, and ultimately Mary ended up getting most of the estate, but it could have been completely avoided if Sonny had had a will. And it reminds me, when you put your will together, the judge is ultimately kind of the traffic director, but you do want to think about people who play roles in this. And one of the things that we had to think about, especially when you have young kids, and this one's the tricky one, is who's going to be the guardian of the kids. Because there's two major roles that you want to think about. There could be more than that. There's probably three when I think about it, like an administrator, a trustee, and a guardian. But the guardian is the one I think about, like who's going to take care of the kids, and then the trustee is who's going to take care of the money. And I generally prefer having them separate. And the trustee, do I want an individual or do I want a corporate trustee? And so if you ever wonder about that, talk with your advisor, PAX. We have a couple corporate trustees that we like to work with. Yes, there's money involved, but when you use a corporation like a bank or somebody to be the trustee, there's just not emotion involved, versus if you were to use your aunt and uncle and or sister and brother, there's just emotions, and it could burden them. So corporate trustees, yes, they cost money, but it's something to consider. So having, again, the judge is going to direct traffic there, but having the guardian and trustee figured out is important. And, unfortunately, Bono was a victim of not having a will, and a lot of chaos and a lot of people fighting. And like I said, I've said it several times now, this idea of having a will is really more than a will. It's having a meeting about where your money goes when you die. And there is going to be a meeting with or without you. And so this discomfort of having a meeting now with you being present is well worth it, because the idea of having a meeting without you is you leaving a legacy of confusion that could destroy family relationships. And so that's why I really want to encourage you to take some time out, work with your advisor, and kind of coordinate with an attorney to, have a thinking partner to think about what type of legacy you want to leave. And an inheritance is what you leave to someone, so that's the financial side, but a legacy is what you leave in someone. And I think that can be spelled out real well with your will. So I hope that helps today. Those are very interesting case studies. There's a lot of them out there. I don't want that to be you. Remember, you think different when you think long term. Have a great day.